Hello, Rachel. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Are you excited about our conversation?
Well, I was more excited than nervous, but then I looked at the list of participants and now I'm nervous.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. They're very nice and they'll all be very eager to hear what you have to say. And you can't hear them anyway, so that I think it'll be okay. Hey, this is cool. It was great to catch up with you yesterday and chat. It's really exciting to be able to talk to you and to go behind the curtain a little bit, behind one of the major streamers, which is still are a little bit shrouded in mystery, I think, for a lot of producers everywhere, but probably particularly in New Zealand. But I hope everyone has sort of looked at your bio, and so we won't sort of revisit that. But I thought you've done a lot of interesting stuff. You've obviously worked for some big companies, and you've worked in on the production side, on our side. What was it like going from E1, Film 4, Hopscotch, STX over to Aquarius in 2020? Was that your first foray into producing, and why the change? Why, just out of interest, did you start producing?
Well, I had been running the production division of Hopscotch some years ago, so I had experience also with developing the feature slate of projects back then, before I moved over to France. So it wasn't exactly my first foray, but my timing to enter the independent production sector was not great. I started my job in February 2020 with Aquarius, and worked in the office for 3 weeks before everything was locked down, and our first major production was shut down the week before but after costs had already been starting to accumulate. So needless to say, we already had a bit of a hole that we needed to dig ourselves out of. And yeah, it's a very, very visceral and intense business to be in, that of independent producing. So I absolutely applaud everyone that does it, and especially those who do it with a great deal of success, because I know the blood, sweat and tears that go into that side of the business.
Yeah, it definitely has its challenges. It's nice knowing that someone on your side has obviously been in our shoes. That certainly helps. Before we get into big questions, Jack, can you tell me what is the worst thing that anyone has done in a pitch for you while you've been at Stan? What's the biggest mistake they've made? And I'll preface this by saying, actually, I was at a film festival in your country a few years ago, and a woman took a blow-up inflatable sex doll with her to all of the pictures for the thing. So I'm just wondering whether anyone's made any faux pas like that.
No one has brought an inflatable sex doll or anything else questionable to any pictures to me since I've been at Stan. No, there haven't been any scandalous behaviours actually while I've been here. I think the very sort of low level crimes I would associate would be with over pitching, either pitching too many projects, pitching too often, or pitching for too long a duration at any one time and not reading the room. So yes, definitely very, very low level.
By comparison, yeah.
Yeah, by comparison.
And best thing, any standouts? What's the most memorable thing that someone's done in a pitch? What's the favorite?
My favorite pitch that I have been on the other end of, I would say, since I've been at Stan, is from an Australian writer called Sarah Bassioni. And if you're not aware of her work, you will be, because I always marvel at the fact that even though we work in the commerce of storytelling, there's actually not that many people that are able to just sit down and tell you a really good yarn. And she really does. And she had all of us in the room on the edge of our seats, and it was quite extraordinary. At the end of the pitch, it was like, where do we sign?
Brilliant. Well, it's good. There is quite an art to it.
There is an art to it, and very few people are good at it.
Yeah, well, I think we try too hard, don't we? I mean, there's a lot of pressure, as you know. It feels like it's all or nothing. They've got to, but actually the ones that are the most successful are the conversations where you connect, and it does help if you can tell a yarn, but ultimately you connect and read the room and form some sort of a relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Stan. Do you want to give us the give us the overview of Stan? And I was particularly interested yesterday in how Stan is quite an anomaly in the global streaming sort of landscape. So sort of focus on give us the overview and focus on how Stan is different from the other streamers, perhaps.
Yeah. So just to give a bit of information about where we came from. We are a subsidiary of the Nine Groups, Australia's largest broadcaster. And Stan was formed 7 years ago, and it has in that time developed into the second largest market share streaming platform in the territory. So second to Netflix. We've got about 2.5 million subscribers at the moment, which equates to about 25% of Australian households, which is really very significant given how crowded the marketplace is at the moment. And that,
do you know what Netflix has, just as a comparison?
I don't. Well, I've sort of heard. I've heard that there's around 7.5. Oh no, hang on. There's two figures. There's the inactive members and the active members, and I can't remember which is which. So no, best to get that information straight from the horse's mouth rather than secondhand from me.
Well, and it's probably dropping by the day if we're reading the trades correctly.
Well, yes, it would be interesting to see what the flow and effect is, and if audiences really are that easily influenced by what they are reading. And also, I guess now is probably a good time for everyone to take stock and look at their subscription portfolios and say, what am I actually watching? What do I actually love? And what actually delivers me the best value? Because while in Australia, and I imagine it's quite similar in other similar Western countries, it's an average of three streaming subscriptions per account holder. So you don't necessarily need to be the most dominant one, but you need to be in the top three if you want to maintain sort of really good active membership within the territory. So I mean, our content offering is a combination of output deals. It's opportunistic acquisitions. It is the Stan Originals offering, which is a big growth area for the company, and the target is by 2025 for us to be 1/3 of the first run offering for all of our content on the platform, which will equate to about 30 titles a year in production. And then we've got stansport, which is about a year since we first offered that to the market, and is a really significant investment for us and a really big part of the subscriber growth drive. So everything that we are doing is very much focused on, are there new audience sectors that we can be targeting to bring subscribers in that aren't already on the platform? Is there a way to boost our offering for the subscribers that we already have so that we make Stan need to be in those top number of subscription services that people are paying for every month? And yeah, how do we engage people that are at risk of, falling away either at the end of their month free trial period, or that are starting to reassess if they might want to move to another platform or not? So it's constantly... it's a constant competition between the dominant players here in the streaming market for people's business. And whenever we look at expanding our originals offering, it's always a question of how does that fit into overall the package that we're offering.
Yeah, it'd be good to focus on that a little bit more. Obviously, your Stan's need or mission to increase subscribers and always be on the lookout for more subscribers and looking at bringing subscribers in, and that's a key driver. You said yesterday that's a key driver for the business. How important? I mean, it's probably important for producers to know just how important that is as a metric when you're evaluating the projects, because it's a little bit different from the traditional independent film financing model, in terms of what a financier or a sales agent or market partner of some description is looking for with that traditional, particularly film model. It's quite a different metric, I think, isn't it, for Stan, if it's all about increasing subscribers, and that really is it not that's the key metric for you, right?
Well, I mean, the key one is increasing subscribers, and that is a more easily measured one to look at, because we can whatever it is that we launch on platform and then the subscribers that choose that as their first viewing, we consider that to be the content hook that's brought those payments through the door. So it's very easily measurable, and it's something that's reported company-wide on a weekly basis as how many subscribers did these new launches bring in, that can be attributed to that. How you measure retention is much more difficult, and you can sort of monitor a series of customer behavior over the course of their account, and you can use that to try and determine at what point they're not feeling that they're getting the value out of the subscription that they might, and then they fall away and maybe subscribe to something else or spend their money elsewhere. So retention is very important as well. It's just more difficult to measure. And also, there's not just the subscriber acquisition, the subscriber retention, but there's also, what is our ROI? And we have to be still paying the right amount of money for things. So that is another sort of lever that we can use to overall evaluate whether something is a good deal for us or not.
Right. And how important is it for producers to have that in mind, have that both ROI and subscriber acquisition in mind when they're pitching you projects? Because I imagine that you want them to come in with a pretty clear strategy of, hey, this is going to help you acquire new subscribers, and or hey, you've got a pretty good chance of getting a decent looking ROI, and here's why.
Yeah. So I think, as I mentioned yesterday, to me, the biggest differentiator between very experienced and less experienced producers is the way they address that question. It's generally less about the creative and more about, okay, how do you make this a compelling investment offering for Stan? And I think that it's about approaching it in different ways. First of all, is having a very critical understanding of who the audience sector is that the content that you've made is for, and how that fits in with the overall sort of audience offerings that we already have there. And I usually point people to, spend some time on Stan. You can, as I've just discovered, actually, you can see everything that we everything that we program on Stan from New Zealand. You just can't click on the actual content. But if you go into it and start familiarizing yourself with the way we program our carousels for content, it starts to sort of break down into pretty clear audience streams, and we organize our content online in a way that makes it the easiest for audiences to find what they want. So if you can sort of look to what you're doing and it can fit into one of those carousel streams reasonably easily, then it sort of indicates that that's a key and important audience for us. And at the same time, we're wanting to find things that are not yet being catered for on platform, but they can't be so alien to what we're already doing that if someone subscribes to Stan to watch this particular series, when they finish the series, there's nowhere for them to go because there's nothing else that's similar to that already on platform. So it's a matter of, it needs to be distinctive enough, but yet similar enough in its tone to be able to sort of sit alongside what's already on the platform. And if there's nothing at all on the Stan platform already that seems like it could sit within the same family of content as your project, then it's probably not a good project for Stan. And then in terms of the ROI, I mean, we've got the thing about originals, about Stan Originals, is that we market the hell out of them. We give them the best opportunity. To date, they have performed extraordinarily well in comparison to our other titles. There are so many editorial angles that we can exploit. It's usually with local familiar talent that's meaningful to audiences. But the other thing is that it's always going to be a much bigger financial outlay for us than an acquisition will be. So whatever you're offering just needs to, the budget and the level of license fee that you're coming to us for needs to be aligned with, like, it can't be so inflated that it would make much more sense for us to just acquire off the market rather than invest in it as an original. So I think having a really clear understanding of what content's costing in the marketplace, understanding the true cost of cast, because we find that under budgeting for meaningful cast is happening over and over again. So knowing really what it's going to cost to get that A-lister that you might be chasing in the project is really critical to putting the package together, because that's going to be our main lever for marketing it down the track. Yeah, I think those are the two main things. And also another thing that is very important when we look at it are who are the other partners in the project with us, because we're not a single source financier. We can't just buy world and fully finance outside of the tax incentives. We need to be able to work globally, and we need to be able to form part of a financing ecosystem. And so to do that, we need to know that we've got other strong partners on board with us for this journey that we both respect in terms of creative collaboration, and that strengthen our position against the global streamers who are our key competition.
Yeah, so that segues really nicely onto, in a way, what is probably a key thing for most producers is when to approach and how to approach and what to approach with, what with in terms of materials. So there's lots of questions here, but I mean, in terms of, and I know that you come in sometimes in development and are quite active as EPs versus an acquisition model where it's an acquisition. So how early, this is always a question that gets asked. When should producers come to you? Particularly in terms of that, there's some back and forth around defining what that ROI is, and it's all very well to say, well, come with that deep understanding of what things cost and how that, and who the international partners are. But is it better to come earlier and develop that with you,
and then make us the anchor, and then you go and find the
exactly.
international partners? Yeah,
exactly. And with that, and because I think you articulated this really well yesterday for people, is just give us the overview of what are the materials to come, what's the broadsheet, what is the basic materials to come in with from the start? What are you looking to see in terms of actual material, pitch materials?
So I'd say I'll address those based on who you are and what you've got, what you're working with, because it's different for if you're a new entrant or an established player, and it's also different depending on the format that we're going with. So I would say for feature films, it's best to come to us with, the best time to come to us is when you've got a package that we can accurately value. So because we're not putting development money into feature films at the moment, what is useful is to have a reasonably well-developed feature script so that we're already very aware of sort of what we've got and what its potential is going to be. We're not doing that speculative early development from treatment to draft. Come in with a director who has either a track record or who brings some kind of buzz or excitement around them as a potential talent to launch, because we're certainly interested in exploring new voices. It just needs to have the right scaffolding around it. But before we can actually be really active in terms of making an offer for the Australian rights, it really has to have cast, because we just can't really put an accurate value on something unless we know what we've got to work with. And generally for Stan releases, it needs to have cast that can hold its own, you know, on every bus, shelter and interstate billboard, because that's the sort of marketing campaigns that we do. So those need to be reasonably well developed. If it's a series, then we can come in earlier. And I'm just trying to think, I mean, we wouldn't really look at anything that didn't already have at least a pitch deck and a first draft, because the pitch deck is to ascertain the robustness of the story over the course of the season, and the first draft to demonstrate the voice. So unless you have a really solid commercial track record already in series that have sold internationally, in which case we would probably do it without the first draft and just do it on a pitch document. That's what I would advise to come in with. And in that instance, I mean, I guess we're working with people across the whole spectrum of experience, and there's the sort of mega companies that we're working with along the lines of sort of Endemol Shine and Fremantle and Matchbox, and those ones that we're working with over and over again. Then there's at the other end of the spectrum, there's a couple of projects that we have on the slate that are so, we just feel like they're so distinctive and the voice is so unique that we really wanted to make a more speculative play for it and just see if it could be one of those shows that really makes us, you know, our version of End of the Fucking World or something like that, you know, that just has such a distinctive vision that you can't turn away from it, even though it doesn't necessarily sort of fit towards your your guidelines or specifications. So that was my very long and winded way of saying a pitch deck and a first draft, please. But in terms of the breadth of talent needing to be attached to it, I would say if your experience level doesn't automatically open the door, then I would always look to partnering up with one of those mega companies if you can, and seeing if there's some sort of co-pro or minority co-pro situation that you could be looking to get that first series credit under the belt, because it's too competitive a market otherwise.
Yeah. So it's a really hard one to answer. Is when should I, as a producer, look to reach out to Matchbox or Endemol or any of those, as opposed to chipping away at it myself? Is there a how do I know whether I should just be trying to do it myself or whether I should be partnering with them?
I would say for the first series, just partner. I think the things that you learn from those companies is so worthwhile, and the speed at which commissions can proceed. I mean, I personally would prefer to see a shared copyright situation proceed to production in 12 months rather than chipping away for 4 or 5 years at something that I retain full ownership with. But then I guess that just depends on what your priorities are as a producer. But I also really like, I mean, the sorts of, just in terms of, I think what you can learn from those companies, like I love looking at the pitch documents that come in from Fremantle and Matchbox and everything, because they're just so on point. And a lot of people, if they haven't worked within one of those companies before, or worked within on the other side of broadcaster and seen, you know, hundreds and hundreds of them coming in, don't necessarily have the visibility of what the absolute cream of the crop pitch decks are supposed to look like.
Yep, totally agree. And actually, I think maybe it might be useful for just to give everyone a rundown on the numbers. It was quite staggering, the amount of pitches that you're actually assessing in a year, and roughly how they're splitting between the genres and film versus television, as I think those numbers are pretty interesting for people considering, and versus how many actually get through to be commissioned, because those numbers are pretty staggering.
Well, in 2021, we looked at 1,000 pitches. So it's very, very, very relentless in terms of the flooding in. Flooding is maybe not the right word to use, but that's what it feels like sometimes. That's why it takes us so long to get back to everyone. And of that, about 20 will go on to be produced. So it's very, very, very low chance of getting through, and which is why I sort of advise people to use every single tool in the toolbox to ensure that you could be in one of those 20.
And what is the rough?
And that will increase to, we'll eventually be going to 30 a year, as I mentioned.
And what is the rough split genres and formats? You said you're getting an awful lot of, everyone's pitching series television at the moment. What's the?
Everyone's pitching series television because, and I get it, it's because right now the financing pathways for that make the most sense, given the financing structures internationally, the avenues that you can exploit, the willingness to get into co-production arrangements and co-commissioning arrangements. It makes a lot of sense. Film has been for many years just a really difficult area to be operating in. So especially with, at the moment in Australia, the producer offset for theatrically released features is 40%, and for films that go directly to Stan or with a short theatrical window is 30%. So it's especially difficult to make feature films that make sense for our model, or in fact for any model, in the absence of a really significant star. So at the moment, our sort of split is we need to cover both 30 and 60-minute series scripted, series comedy, which we're more which we tend to skew more towards the 30-minute format over 60, because we find that audiences really like to kind of gobble it up. We're doing quite a lot of factual. So we've just launched a new strand of Stan Originals called Revealed, which is investigative journalism based. And it originally sprung from our out of collaborations with 60 Minutes here and The Age, Melbourne's sort of flagship newspaper, and Sydney Morning Herald, and working with the journalists there to go deeper into the stories that they were writing and cross over from that journalistic form into a more narratively structured documentary form. So we're going on those, and then also in the attempt to keep out, because our sports subscribers, it's an add-on package. So, but we want to keep people on the platform even after they have finished watching whatever, tournament it is that they've been watching. So we have an eye also to when projects can, lure those sports subscribers over. So we've got a raft of sports documentaries as well on the platform, and also just always keeping an eye out for what things on the Stan Original scripted side could be something that would entice that audience to show them that we've got a robust content offering for them on the main platform as well. Oh, and a little bit of kids. And every year we'll do a Christmas film.
Great.
They come in all shapes and sizes. Stan Originals.
But that's a lot. I mean, that 1,000 pitches and 20 getting made is a pretty relevant stat for people considering what they should be bringing to you, and whether they should partner up with a bigger company to get it made, and all the rest of it. It's pretty competitive. Can we just talk a little bit about development? I know that you said you can come in as to develop more in series than on film. And I know when we spoke yesterday, you said that in those cases you're fairly active EPs in development, not passive. Can you sort of give us an example of how you would get involved in series development and where you'd want to be inputting, and just how that process would work?
Sure. So we are getting involved in series generally when there's some sort of pitch deck or mini Bible on board and a first draft, and that's the case most of the time, no matter the experience level of the production company that's involved. And generally, we like to partner with people in development where we can. So our most sort of obvious development partners tend to be the state funding bodies. So we've got stuff in the pipeline with the SAFC over here and Screen West and Screen New South Wales. We can do match funding. So match funding development is a good pathway for us to go, just to mitigate our risk somewhat. We're also big on developing with international partners. So if something comes to us already with another anchor broadcaster on board, then we can co-develop, and again, it can share the risk around. I think that off the top of my head, almost all the things that we're developing are in partnership with someone else. So it is a good proposal to come to us with someone else who's interested. And certainly we'd be happy for that to be the NZFC. So please do keep that in mind.
Not currently. Are you currently developing anything with from New Zealand or with New Zealand producers?
Currently, no. Our New Zealand project that we have on the slate is Nude Tuesday, which we are very excited about because we all love it and think it has something really unique to offer audiences. And the cool thing about it with having the streaming to follow on from the theatrical is that we will get to showcase the different sets of subtitles on the platform, which will be very cool. So no, not at the moment, but the eyes and ears are always open.
There's the opportunity for everyone. There we go. You're going to get a lot of pictures from everyone tomorrow, I'm sure.
Make it 1,100 next year.
Yeah. What's the count at now? 107, 106. Oh shit, we just lost someone. Oh, we lost two. They've gone to do their.
We bored them.
To do their pictures now. They want to get in. They want to get in first. I'm going to quickly answer a couple of questions just because they keep popping up. And there, James Griffin wanted to know pitch in the room versus on the page, which yields the best long-term results. Can we pitch to you in person without being on the page? You seem like you're too busy. Where would we find you to do that?
Well, we've just started attending things like Screen Forever again, and the acquisitions team is off to LA screenings. I think I don't know where we'll be. Well, I mean, we're always here, but no one's actually come into a pitch meeting at Stan yet because everyone's just still sort of thinking it's 2021. I have to say though, after being able to do pitches on Zoom through all this time, it's really made me realize that I'd prefer to do it that way than in person, because we've got a lot to get through, and the in-person meetings tend to slow the day down. So if we can sort of keep things rolling on a Zoom call, that's good. But I also think it's not necessary to always have one. If you've got one of those just killer writers that is able to tell an amazing story, then that's great. But there's not actually that many that are that great in a verbal pitch. And so if that's not your superpower, then I'd say send a really good email. Send a really good email with either a one-pager attached if it's a feature, or with a pitch deck attached if it's a series, and then ask us if we'd like to read the script based on what is there in the. I find that the most efficient, and I appreciate that more than sort of an extended verbal pitch that might not be for something we're interested in.
Yep. Yep. Here's speaking of extended verbal pitch, here's an interesting one from an anonymous attendee, asking basically what is the ideal length of an in-person pitch. You mentioned somewhere a very compelling pitch, after which you immediately responded, "Where do I sign?" What was the approximate duration of that pitch? Is that what this person's asking?
That one is an anomaly, and I wouldn't recommend doing it because she probably pitched the story for about 10 minutes, but honestly, she's the only person that I've ever received a pitch like that from that I felt warranted the time given to it. I would much prefer, I mean, and this may be just me because my background is in the acquisition sector of feature film market. So I'm used to sitting in a room with a sales agent and having them pitch a story to me in about 45 seconds.
Yeah.
And that's generally my attention span with pitches. I'm probably at the one end of the spectrum though, but I think shorter is better. Really shorter is better because we've just got a lot to look at. So would prefer, you need to be succinct. And at the end of the day, whatever format your project is on, it's going to end up being pitched by an international distributor or a sales agent, and it's going to have to be pitchable in 45 seconds. So that's what it's going to end up being distilled to anyway. So may as well start as we intend to carry on, I think.
Yep. Good. Let's sort of walk through a practical example then. I've done my 45-second pitch. You loved it and you signed on the dot, and just sort of walk us through that. Actually, walk us through your internal, because I know it's not that simple. How does your internal commissioning process? I've pitched to you, 45 seconds, killed it. You love it. What do you need to do to actually get it made, and how to get a green light, and how long is that process?
Okay, so you've pitched something. I think the concept's really cool. I think the director has a really good track record. They're either exciting for their potential or they've demonstrated, whatever it is they need to demonstrate. And you've got some cast that we find sellable. And next thing would be share the finance plan with me. We would go through it line by line, interrogate all of it, see if there's any weak spots, see if there's any unrealistic expectations in terms of the numbers that are expected from either the international marketplace or from the soft money or from us, any of those things. Have a look at the budget. Is there adequate? We would have a look at the budget and whether we think that it's makeable for that. This would all still be done at the originals team level. And then presuming that we get excited about it and want to work together, then we would take it through the internal commissioning process. And that is, I find, really similar in every company that I've ever worked in. And the information is always fairly similar, no matter the country or the territory that it's in. And it's always a summary of the story. Again, it's never more than one paragraph, because whoever is up in the senior ranks of the commissioning process is only going to have time to read one paragraph. So your story has to sound great in one paragraph. It's a summary of all the attachments and what their credits are. It's any other sort of key marketable information. For example, this lead star or creator or whatever has 8 million Instagram followers, that kind of stuff. That any of those sort of measurable information that helps to strengthen the overall commerciality of the package. Nod to the delivery timeframes, because so much of our planning is based on not only how many titles, what our budget allocation is for any financial year, but also it's when in the financial year it's going to land, and is this something that could be launched as a big summer title, which is when we put all of our big stuff through. Is it a film that is going to either, because it's got the investment of a film festival, for example, that we need to take that into consideration before we do our launch to platform afterwards? Is there a theatrical window that needs to squeeze in there? And if so, do we have a relationship with a theatrical distributor that we can lean on so that there's a working understanding there? All that sort of stuff forms part of the sell. And then it would be looking at the investment that is the investment and the ask that's being asked required from Stan, and how does that fit against what we're paying for other original titles? How does that fit in terms of would we be better off to not invest in this film as a Stan original and acquire something like it off the international marketplace? So it needs to present like a reasonable investment ask that doesn't seem out of place compared to other things that we're doing. And then, yeah, it's a matter of getting, I mean, we present all of our shortlisted options for commissioning, and then we all cross our fingers and hope that it goes forward.
Is there a it's a hard one to answer, I know, but is there a sweet spot in terms of the ask, whether that's an absolute sort of level or whether it's a percentage of budget, or, you know, is there a sweet spot? As a
guide, or as a starting point, we use for our series investment and our documentary investment, we use the Screen Australia minimum license fee per hour guidelines. And so that tends to be the license fee, and then over and above that becomes an equity investment, and that is going to then depend on what we think is the chance of recouping that equity. So, I mean, by all means, pump up the equity ask in the finance plan, but there needs to be a demonstration that we're actually likely to see that recouped before we get excited about that side of things. On the feature film side, we tend to look at around 10% of the budget as a starting point. And that's for Australia only. So where it kind of gets interesting for New Zealand is because usually for an Australian generated project, the Australian part of the ANZ as a territory is the important part for us, and New Zealand part is likely to be the minority revenue driver in the equation. But if we flip it and we've got a New Zealand project where New Zealand's going to be the key revenue driver, there's just probably a lot more potential for upside for the producer, because you're not sitting behind a 10-year license period for Stan. You've got potential to recoup from first dollar.
And talk about that license for a minute. It's a 10-year all rights.
10-year all rights in Australia.
And that's always the case. That's the standard license. There's no room there.
That's the standard license. And if we start deviating from that, then it starts to become more of something that we look at. It starts to be something that, rather than going off as a Stan original, it becomes more of an acquisition. So we look at it through that lens, which is a completely different department and negotiation. And also license fee, because the acquisitions fees are much lower than the originals. So it kind of just depends what you need.
Yep. So get in early with some good pitch materials and
a really solid finance plan.
Yep. And then let's say go to the series. Then let's say we've done that and we have a significant in the finance plan. We have a significant foreign broadcaster, but we don't have them attached. But you like the project. Is that something where you'll come on in development and sort of work with us to potentially find the right broadcast partner, or is that a bridge too far? You want that to be in place?
We haven't so much been brokering deals directly with broadcast partners. We tend to add a lot of value in terms of attaching international distributors for series, because we're always buying from them. We've got development partnerships with some, like, for example, we've got a deal at the moment with Lionsgate to develop 3 series with them. So, and then there's other distributors, people like All3, that we work with time and time again, and there's a really solid working relationship. So we are absolutely happy to open the doors, make the introductions for the right projects to the people that we like working with, to keep it all in the family, so to speak. But less so, I've not so much seen, okay, so less so in terms of helping someone to secure a co-commissioner, I'd say.
Yep. Are there any no-go partners? I mean, the obvious one being Netflix. They're your key competitor in the market. Is there a scenario where you would partner with them somehow in a project? I mean, I know they like to take all rights anyway, but are there any no-go partners really?
We wouldn't be able to at the financing stage. I mean, there's always the opportunity for them to acquire for the remaining territories a Stan Original project, but it would probably end up being a massive contracting headache, I'm guessing, because of untangling all of the branding requirements and holdback requirements and all of that sort of stuff. So I'd say it's not so much that there's no-goes, it's just that we're more compatible with other major territorial players like BBC and Sky and Peacock and HBO Max and the likes of those, rather than going for the
pretty much everyone else. Pretty much everyone else.
The non-global players.
The non-global players. No, yeah, fair enough. I'm conscious of time. We've got 10 minutes technically, I believe, so I feel like we should probably address some of more of the questions. Otherwise, we're gonna miss out. We've done James. Are you happy to buy off an experienced NZ team without Aussie co-producers?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, it doesn't have to have Australian content as long as we can make it relevant to our audiences.
Yeah, that's another one from James. There's huge cultural differences between Australia and New Zealand. Should a series be set in Australia or be Australian centric?
Oh, sorry. In terms of the need for its Australianness, it helps greatly if there's some sort of hook when it comes to positioning it for audiences and when it comes to getting traction editorially. It's difficult to brand it as a Stan Original when there's no hooks to lean into. That said, it is absolutely possible still, and we have done it, and we certainly will do it more. And it's not essential. It just sort of feels more organic.
And I guess it comes back to that key metric we talked about at the start of subscriber acquisition or retention.
Yeah. Right? Do we think it will attract subscribers?
Yep.
Is there something that we can market here that will bring people into Stan and keep them on Stan?
And there was another question there about, are you interested in Indigenous content like Pacific Island stories? Well, I imagine that's the same answer. Yes,
it's like, do we think that it's going to serve an audience who are hungry to hear that story?
Yeah.
So it's not making the commission because we're specifically looking for that. It's like, well, who's going to sign up because they want to see this story? And if we can point to a substantial audience sector, and ideally with some sort of, well, this audience sector is already interested in this talent for this reason, and you can see the demonstration of interest through some sort of, proof of concept, not proof of concept, but like, I don't know if it's a social media engagement thing or if it's because there already is a demonstration that there's activity there within that audience sector, then absolutely.
Yeah. Easy one to answer. Do you buy finished documentaries? Finished, not finished. It sounded like I said finished documentaries.
Finished.
Finished documentaries.
We do. That would be something I'd refer to my colleagues in acquisitions.
But that was a yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. Yep. Is stansport looking to commission original documentary content?
Well, whenever we're looking at original documentary content for our sports subscribers, we do work with the sports team to determine who we think is interesting to target and which sports are. I mean, there's so much tied up in terms of licensing agreements and who we're and which different sports where. Sorry, I'm so hopeless on the sports side. It's not something I'm familiar with at all. I'm like, yes, balls, people running. Yeah.
That was going to be our next question. Is Rachel, is it you that we should be pitching our sports documentary stories to? Because I'm not convinced it is.
I funnel it towards people that are more knowledgeable about what's interesting to that audience than myself.
At least you're honest. That's good.
Yeah, you can't be good at everything.
No, exactly. And that leads me on to short films. Would Stan consider short films or anthology series?
Short films, no. It doesn't feel like something that is a subscriber driver for us. So at this point, we don't have any intention to work in that format. Anthologies we find problematic, difficult to set up, difficult to oversee when you've got all of these different cast and everyone changing every episode. It creates for a very unwieldy production. So don't know that we feel that we get the value for our time investment on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Are you looking for anything specific in kids content aside from fitting well into viewers' carousel? I feel like someone's got a project they want to pitch in.
So we announced last year an initiative with the Australian Children Television Foundation to do one kids film a year with them. They take the international rights and we take Australia. So they would be selling New Zealand under this arrangement. And we're in development at the moment on our first title. So we are, I mean, the great thing about kids, well, I would say it's probably at this stage more a focus on family as opposed to kids, because we really like, I mean, anything that's a co-viewing opportunity carries the most value for us. So yes, we are. We haven't done one yet, but actually we did a Sunburnt Christmas. Last year's Christmas film was a family film. So yeah, there is a family film opportunity there. Oh, we're also doing The Portable Door. Yeah, okay. We have done lots of families. We are active in family films, yet to branch out into family series, but I'm all ears, because I think if you can nail it, it just plays and it exports and it goes all around the world. And yeah.
Well, certainly as a father of two daughters, trying to, the amount of conversations you have trying to find something that we can all watch
together that doesn't drive you crazy. Yeah.
So much time. And that is like gold. If you can suggest to me something that parents and a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old are going to watch it, that is like gold. It's better than recommendation than, I don't care who's winning at Cannes or Sundance or whatever. Just tell me something that we're all going to watch, and I'll tell you what, we're winning. Either you're going to like this one. I know you're going to like this question. With a rise in omnicultural audiences, what tools are you using to discover true audience demographic? Okay.
Now, I have to admit that I don't really understand what an omnicultural audience means. That's the first time I've heard that word, but I'll wing it. What tools are we using to
discover true audience demographic?
True audience demographic. So that's a really interesting one, and one that there is a lot of discussion about at the moment, because I feel like in the past 20 years that I've been looking at, how do you describe your audience for a certain film? We used to break it down very much around, it was for a 35 plus, female skewed, white collar, well-educated, arts interested audience. Like, we used language like that. And that doesn't really so much work anymore. Or at least it doesn't really work for us anymore. It might still work if you're looking at things in the, say, theatrical release environment. what we instead note, and this is based on looking at audience behavior over the course of their account, over their subscription, is that you definitely see grouping, and it's based more on tone or genre than it is about age, or, I mean, there's still a sort of notion of something being more female or more male skewed, but it definitely, the way we segment our content or segment our audiences has changed, and the language that we use with the marketing team and the programming team has changed and is changing and is, as we speak, still being formulated. But I mean, there's, rather than, you know, saying 40 plus male, blah, 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 we'll sort of say, I mean, we've got a content type that we call mean streets, and we refer it as to sort of muscular or gritty. It encompasses all the sort of more, I don't know, like all of your action and crime and thriller and all of those sorts of genres. They all sort of aggregate together into this one sort of vibe of audience, which feels a lot more nebulous than just breaking it down based on and cutting it off at, you know, 35 plus is this type of audience and 18 to 35 is a different type of audience. And so, yeah, we're very much changing the way we talk about audience segmentation. And there's those sort of big groupings. I mean, we've got another one that we sort of call it's sort of our suburban audience, and they're the audience that can actually sit down and co-view stuff with parents and children and be as equally engaged. And we see that there's a lot of account sharing within that, you know, within the one family, all account sharing. And there's, yeah, just sort of like a mainstream suburban family demographic that we also sort of refer to now. There's another demographic that I call the women behaving badly demographic, and it's the stuff you know, from Fleabag to Killing Eve to, you know, any of those things that sort of sit within that, or it's hacks, or it's, you know, but it's generally this stuff that's led by female protagonists and has a lot of sass and usually has, you know, a lot to say about patriarchy and feminism these days, even if it's very much undercurrent. So there is a different way that we now talk about audience segmentation, and within that we need to also be very conscious of very dedicated, smaller but very much dedicated audience groups that might be grouped around a special interest or a particular personality or something like that. So yeah, it's sort of the core part of our business, really, making sure we've got content to service all of those demographics.
And does Stan release any of that critical audience secretive data that, or are you going to, as the plans to? Come on.
Who knows? I'm not really sure why streamers are so secretive. I actually don't know why.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll see it published in the near future. You know who's actually great with being very open about that information is Ted Hope.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyone who hasn't seen Ted Hope speak, I urge you to find his talks online. Buy his book if you can. I think we've got a copy on order from Amazon, because he actually he opens up really candidly about this, and he has an amazing wealth of experience from his whole career and his most recent experiences at Amazon, and he breaks open some of the mystery, I think. So I direct you to him. He's also just incredibly engaging.
I agree. Yeah, no, he's big on transparency. He always has been. I think right. I mean, I was being a little bit intentionally sort of just facetious there, but hey, I would open the books. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I would, but because I don't know how to
judge,
keep secrets. But yeah, I have to go. I'm sorry, because I've got to go into another meeting.
It doesn't end for you. Well, obviously we've got lots more questions that we couldn't get to. I knew that would happen, but I think Eloise is going to wrap us up. But hey, that was really fun, Rachel. Thank you. Really informative. And the other